200,000 years ago, Africa was not wilderness, it was sovereign. The sun has not yet cleared the horizon. Light moves across the savanna at a low angle, catching the top of the grass, leaving the ground still dark. The air is cold, not metaphorically cold, cold enough that the muscles in a man's jaw tighten without permission, cold enough that breath is visible, and visibility, here, is a problem. 8 men move through the tall grass in tight formation. No sound, no words. They are not exploring. They know exactly where they are. That is not the issue. The issue is what else knows. Each step is a decision made below conscious thought, inherited across 10,000 generations of mornings exactly like this one. Heel barely grazes the ground. Weight rolls inward across the foot, dispersing pressure, canceling sound. Each man carries a spear. Fire-hardened wood. Some tips fitted with flint fixed by tendon fiber and resin. Simple. Effective. The product of a knowledge system with no writing, no institution, no building, and no margin for error. There is no conversation. A shift of the chin. A glance held a half-second too long. A pause that means stop or now or I already saw it. This is language, compressed to its absolute minimum. Every syllable removed that could be removed. What remains is pure signal. The savanna looks calm. Giraffes feed to the north. Gazelles move in a loose diagonal. Birds of prey turn slow circles in an amber sky. Everything within normal parameters. Everything functional. Then something changes. No sound, no movement. Something changes anyway. The birds pull their circles tighter. One giraffe stops mid-chew and stares at a fixed point in the vegetation 30 meters ahead. The gazelles shift, not fleeing, just compressing, a half-step closer to each other that no human observer would notice. The wind weakens. Then it changes direction. The eldest raises his hand. That is all. Everyone stops. Not from fear. Fear is loud, imprecise, expensive. This is calculation, cold and immediate as the air itself. The silence that follows is not empty. It is loaded. The group moves into a new configuration without a single word exchanged. 2 forward, 2 covering the rear. The others forming an asymmetric arc to the sides, deliberately uneven, because symmetry is predictable and predictable is a way of dying. They have done this before. The specific memory does not matter. The body remembers what the mind never formally learned. Ahead, a carcass. Old, partially consumed. Bones bleached white on the surface, tissue still preserved in the cavities underneath. The youngest kneels beside it, touches the ground. Surface dry. 2 centimeters down, still faintly damp. Someone was here within the last 8 hours. The marks on the bones are long, deep, precisely spaced. Not lions, too controlled. Not hyenas, too deliberate. Something that does not eat because it is hungry. Something that eats because eating is not the point. Positioning is the point. Nobody says its name, not superstition. Strategy. You do not name it because naming it makes it present. And it may already be present. Adding a name to that changes nothing except your own composure. And composure is the only resource that cannot be replaced mid-situation. The wind moves again. This time it brings something with it. Warm flesh. Active musk. The specific chemical signature of muscles heated by intent rather than exertion. The difference between an animal that has been running and an animal that is about to. Those who grew up here learn to read that difference the way others learn to read faces. Before language. Before anything. The eldest closes his eyes. 3 seconds. He is not afraid. He is listening with his entire body, every sense rerouted toward the one signal that matters. Then he opens his eyes. He knows. He does not move. Because moving now, 1 second before necessary, tells whatever is out there that the game has changed. And if the game changes before you are ready, you lose. Somewhere between the growing light and the dark base of the vegetation, something is watching. Not angry. Not hungry. Deciding. This group crossed a threshold 2 minutes ago. Not a physical line, but a threshold of attention. The moment a predator shifts from passive awareness to active calculation. The moment you stop being part of the landscape and become a problem to be solved. Both sides know this is happening. Neither side moves. This is not a story about the dawn of humanity. It is not about what we became. It is about what we already were, 200,000 years ago, in the cold morning air of a savanna that did not care about us at all. 8 men standing absolutely still, thinking several moves ahead and refusing to make the first mistake. The silence belongs to the predator. For now, neither side moves. The Dinofelis is in the Vicellio woodland edge, 30 to 50 meters west. The group knows this not because they can see it, but because 3 independent sensory channels confirmed it in the last 4 minutes. The scent profile, the behavioral disruption in the Giraffe and the birds, and the shadow compression at the tree base that the youngest hunter caught at the extreme left of his visual field. 3 channels, all pointing at the same coordinates. The probability of error is low enough that the group is operating as if there is no error. The eldest hunter has not moved in 90 seconds. This is not paralysis. Paralysis looks like paralysis. This looks like a man standing in a field, which is exactly what it is designed to look like. The decision, when it comes, is communicated by weight, not a gesture, not a look. The eldest hunter shifts his center of gravity by approximately 3 centimeters onto his right foot. That is all. The 2 hunters at the front of the formation read it and begin moving, not away from the woodland edge, not toward it, but at 45 degrees southeast, into the open grassland, their pace identical to the pace they would use if nothing had happened. The pace of men who have not noticed anything, the pace of men who are not interesting. The remaining 6 follow in the same register. The performance is precise because it has to be. A Dinofelis at 30 meters can cover that distance in under 2 seconds. The variable it is calculating is whether the energy expenditure of a pursuit across open ground against 8 coordinated spears produces a return worth the cost. The group's job is to make that calculation resolve against pursuit. They do this by moving at the pace of something that is not prey. Prey accelerates. Prey shows the specific muscle tension of an animal that knows it has been seen. These 8 men move at the pace of men going somewhere else for reasons that have nothing to do with the animal in the trailing. It is the best performance any of them will ever give, and none of them will ever discuss it. They cover 200 meters before the eldest hunter allows the pace to shift. The shift is incremental, 5% faster, then another 5. The acceleration spread across 40 meters so that nothing watching from the trailing registers a transition point. By the time they are moving at full travel pace, they are 300 meters from the woodland edge, and the angle has opened enough that a pursuit would be visible from distance before it arrived. The Giraffe to the north resumes feeding. The birds expand their orbital radius. The Dinofelis made its calculation. The group was not worth the open ground expenditure against 8 spears. This is the correct outcome. It is not a victory. It is the correct outcome, which is a different thing entirely. Victories imply alternatives. There was no acceptable alternative here. There was only the correct decision executed with sufficient precision to produce the correct result. The youngest hunter exhales once, slowly, through his nose. That is the only acknowledgement. They find the Lycaon-Secoe pack 40 minutes later, northeast, exactly where the morning's track reading suggested they would be. 7 individuals at the southern edge of the open basin, stationary, in the assessment phase of a hunt. The Pelorovis antiquus herd visible at the basin center. 12 animals, the enormous lateral horns of the adults spanning 2.5 meters in the hard noon light. The group drops into the Luga channel at the basin's western approach and holds. What follows is not hunting. It is reading. The Lycaon-Secoe have already done the selection. The old female at the herd's eastern edge, her movement pattern carrying the specific slight asymmetry of an animal managing a chronic load-bearing injury in the left rear quarter. The pack knows this. They have been watching her for longer than the group has been watching the pack. The hunters are third in a sequence that started before they arrived, and third in a sequence has specific rules. You do not intervene. You do not redirect. You do not change the outcome. You position for what comes after the outcome. The eldest hunter moves the group 200 meters north along the Luga, repositioning for the kill's likely terminal location based on the herd's current orientation and the pack's approach angle. The calculation takes him less than 30 seconds. The repositioning takes 4 minutes. They are in place before the Lycaon-Secoe initiate the run. The run lasts less than 3 minutes. The old female separates at the predicted angle. The pack converges. The dust rises from the basin floor in dense red laterite clouds. The terminal location is within 40 meters of where the eldest hunter positioned the group. The Pachycracuta brevirostris arrive 8 minutes after the kill. 3 individuals, 100 kilograms each, the bone-crushing jaw structure visible at 30 meters. They approach with the confidence of animals that have never needed to doubt their competitive weight. The eldest hunter steps forward from the perimeter line. One step, spear tip angled directly at the lead Pachycracuda's face. The 6 perimeter hunters close the arc by half a meter without any signal. The Pachycracuda holds at 25 meters. The 2 butchers work faster. This is the negotiation. It has no language. It has geometry, proximity, and the specific credibility of 8 spears held by organisms that the Pachycracuda's own evolutionary history has flagged as unpredictable. Not weak, not strong. Unpredictable. Unpredictable is its own category in the threat matrix of every large predator on this savanna, and it is the category that produces the most conservative behavioral responses. The Pachycracuda waits. The butchers finish. The group withdraws at the specific pace that tells the Pachycracuda the negotiation is concluded on agreed terms. The Pachycracuda moves to the carcass before the group has cleared 50 meters. No pursuit. The terms were understood by both parties and neither party violated them. They carry the meat west through the afternoon heat. The hide-wrapped packages are heavy. The old female was large despite her age. The hindquarter yields substantial. The 2 carrying hunters adjust their spear grip to counterbalance the load, a postural shift that redistributes the weight across the shoulder and frees the spear hand for deployment if required. The sun is descending toward the western Vichelia, Tortolis Treeling. The shadows are lengthening behind them. The group moves at the pace of people who have resolved the day's central questions and are now executing the final variable, returning the protein to the group before the light goes and the night's different threat matrix begins. They approach the camp from downwind. They slow at 80 meters. They let the camp read them before they enter. They slow at 80 meters. Not from exhaustion. The deceleration is deliberate and specific. The first movement of a protocol that has nothing to do with fatigue and everything to do with the fact that you do not walk directly into a settled group carrying the scent of fresh blood and a full day of predator proximity. You let the camp read you. You give it time to process what it is seeing before you close the distance. A group that cannot read an approach correctly is a group that will eventually respond to the wrong approach incorrectly. This group has survived long enough that the protocol is older than anyone in it can remember. The camp is where they left it. Elevated ground. Single approach corridor. The low controlled fire visible at the center, still at the exact height it was built to maintain. 7 figures visible around it in the late afternoon light. The oldest man is already standing. He reads the package volume from 80 meters, and his body communicates the assessment before the hunters have covered half the remaining distance. The weight shift. The fractional acknowledgement. It means noted. It means the day resolved correctly. It means now there is work to do before the light goes completely. They enter from the correct angle. Downwind. Always downwind. Before anything else, the perimeter. 2 hunters peel from the formation before the meat packages are set down. They move outward from the camp in opposite arcs, reading the ground at the camp's edges. Pressed grass. Disturbed soil. The specific displacement patterns that indicate what has been near this position during the hours the hunters were gone. The check takes 6 minutes. It covers a radius of 40 meters in every direction. They find nothing that changes the threat assessment. The camp is clean. The day's absence did not invite anything that stayed. The 2 hunters return to the center without announcement. The absence of announcement is the announcement. The perimeter check communicates its result through silence the same way everything else communicates here. The presence of a signal means something, the absence of a signal means something else, and both are understood before anyone has to explain them. The fire is built up. The oldest man manages this with the specific authority of someone who has built 10,000 fires in conditions ranging from this to significantly worse. The dry acacia would selected for low smoke. The flame height brought to the level that manages heat without broadcasting location. The wind direction assessed, and the fire positioned so the smoke disperses away from the sleeping area. None of this is discussed. All of it is correct. The meat packages are opened on the flat laterite beside the fire. The Pelorovis antiquus hindquarter sections substantial and dark in the firelight. The levallois flakes come out. One of the women moves into the processing area without direction, and her cutting technique is more efficient in this stationary application than anything the hunters could produce after a full day of field work. They yield the task without discussion. Competence here has no ego attached to it, and never has. The bone sections go directly to the fire's edge. The marrow already extracted, but the remaining bone carrying residual tissue that the heat will render accessible. The hide sections not needed for wrapping are folded and set aside for tomorrow's work. The sinew stretched across a dry branch at the fire's warmth to begin drying. Nothing with remaining function is set aside as waste. The allocation of every part of the animal was determined before the processing began. The meat warms at the fire's edge, not cooking. Warming, the specific distance from the flame that alters the surface protein structure and reduces the microbial load without burning what took the entire day to carry back. The fat renders at the surface and hisses where it contacts the hot laterite at the fire's base. The smell changes. The 7-year-old eating more slowly, still watching everything. The eyes moving between the meat and the fire and the darkness beyond the fire's reach in a pattern that is already, at 7 years old, beginning to resemble the pattern of the adults. The hunters eat in the specific silence of total biological exhaustion that cannot yet afford to become unconsciousness. The oldest man eats last. His calculation about caloric need relative to the second watch is already complete. He times his intake accordingly, and nobody notices and nobody needs to. The fire drops to its night register. 2 hunters take the first perimeter watch, backs to the fire, spears across their knees, their night vision preserved against the light source behind them. The sleeping cluster forms without direction. Children at the interior, adults at the outer layer. The configuration arrived at through the same wordless competence that manages everything else. The 4-year-old is asleep before the cluster has fully settled, the boneless sleep of a small body that has nothing left to spend. The stars appear. The Southern Cross rises on the southern horizon, the same stars that will be there in 200,000 years, indifferent to everything happening beneath them. The temperature has dropped 15 degrees since the sun touched the western Vichelia tortoise tree. The savanna at night is a different place from the savanna of the day, different sounds, different threats, different rules. The fire holds at its managed low. The camp is quiet. In the Vichelia woodland to the west, at a distance of perhaps 60 meters, something has been completely still for a very long time. It arrived before the hunters did. It has been here since the light changed, and it has been watching every single thing that happened from the moment the first hunter entered the camp's perimeter to this moment now. The fire, the food, the children, the spacing of the watchers, the exact position of every spear. It has not moved. It is not hungry. It is learning. Nobody slept. Not completely. Not in the way the previous night produced sleep. The deep biological shutdown of organisms that had spent everything the day demanded and needed the night to rebuild. This night produced something different. A sustained half-consciousness. Bodies horizontal, but minds running at a level that sleep could not fully claim. The 4 perimeter watchers with their burning branches did not need to be relieved, because nobody they would have relieved was fully asleep to begin with. The fire stayed high. The oldest man allowed it. He sat at the camp center through the entire night, and did not take a watch position, and did not lie down. He sat with his back to the fire, and faced the western woodland, and watched the darkness the way he had watched 1,000 other darknesses across 60 years of nights, exactly like this one, and nothing like this one simultaneously. Because there had never been a night exactly like this one. There had been Dinofelis before. There had been proximity before. There had been the scent on the wind and the marks on the bones and the shadow compression at the tree line that told you it was close. There had never been the eyes at the woodland edge watching the fire back. That was new. And new, in this world, is the most expensive category of information there is. The 2 points of reflected light appeared at midnight and did not move until the first pre-dawn gray touched the eastern horizon, 0.4 hours. Motionless. At the exact boundary where the fire's light ended and the woodland's darkness began, as if the animal had calculated the precise perimeter of visibility and positioned itself 1 meter inside the invisible line. Then it moved. Not the slow repositioning of an animal adjusting its observation point. Not the fractional weight shift of something settling into a new stillness. This was different, and every person awake in the camp registered the difference before their minds had processed what their bodies already knew. The 2 points of light dropped, the animal lowering its head, and then they were coming forward, fast, out of the woodland and across the open ground toward the camp. The spotted coat catching the firelight as the Dinofelis covered the 60 meters at a speed that collapsed the distance into something that had no room for decisions. That IT had calculated the spacing of the watchers. It had chosen the gap on the left. What it had not calculated was the hunter positioned at the diagonal edge of the perimeter, not at the gap, not directly in the animal's line, but at the angle where a man moving fast enough could intercept the trajectory before it reached the camp's interior. He was already moving when the animal cleared the tree, not away, toward. He covered the ground at a full sprint, burning branch in his right hand, and he ran directly at the Dinofelis from its left flank at an angle that the animal had not included in its calculation. The Dinofelis registered the converging body 2 strides before the intersection point and checked. Not stopped, checked. The forward momentum braking against the unexpected variable of something running at it instead of away from it. The animal stopped, for meters from the hunter, both of them breathing. The Dinofelis turned its full attention to the man in front of it. The elongated canines wet in the firelight, the massive forelimbs planted, the assessment running at full intensity on this single organism that had just done something that nothing in the animal's accumulated experience had ever done before. The rest of the group closed the circle. They came from every angle simultaneously, spears forward, the formation tightening around the Dinofelis in a ring that left no clean exit point. The animal turned again. The ring was complete and consistent, and every gap it identified closed before it could commit to the direction. The fire behind the group threw their shadows forward, long and moving, and the shadows were part of the wall. The Dinofelis found the gap. There is always a gap. The hunters knew this. They had left one deliberately, not from error, from knowledge. You do not corner an animal with no exit, because an animal with no exit is more dangerous than an animal with one. That they left the gap to the east, away from the camp, away from the children, into the open grassland. The animal took it. It moved through the gap at full speed, and the hunter who had intercepted it was already running again. The burning branch held forward, pursuing across the open ground in the darkness. Each stride a negotiation of terrain he could not fully see. The Dinofelis was faster. It was always going to be faster. He was not trying to catch it. He was trying to finish the message that the circle had started. He threw the branch at 12 meters. Not a precise weapon, a decision. The burning branch tumbled through the dark air and struck the Dinofelis across its left flank, the flame making contact for less than 1 second, and the sound the animal made was something none of them had ever heard before. Not a roar, not a scream. Something between the two that carried across the open savanna, and then the Dinofelis was gone. Moving north into the darkness at a speed that put distance between them faster than any pursuit could close it, the hunter stopped. Both hands went to his chest simultaneously, the instantaneous physical reflex of a body checking itself after an extreme expenditure, feeling for damage, feeling for burns, feeling for the confirmation that the thing that just happened left him intact. His hands pressed flat against his sternum, his breathing ragged, his eyes on the darkness where the animal had disappeared. Nothing. He was unburned. His hands told him this in under 3 seconds, and he accepted the information and turned back toward the camp. He walked back at the pace of a man who has done what needed doing and is now returning to the group that watched him do it. The camp received him without ceremony. The eldest hunter's hand on his shoulder for 2 seconds. Then everyone returned to their positions. Nobody slept. The fire was built to its highest point of the entire 3 days, and it stayed there until the dawn came up full and clear over the eastern savanna, and there was nothing at the woodland edge and nothing in the open ground, and the Southern Cross had completed its arc, and the night had been survived by everyone it had tried. The oldest man was the first to stand. He looked west at the woodland for a long time. Then he looked east at the open grassland, the new light moving across it the way light has moved across that ground every morning for longer than anything alive can comprehend. He looked at the group around him, the hunters, the women, the children now waking from the shallow, exhausted sleep of the final pre-dawn hours. The youngest hunter with the burn mark on his palm, where the branch had been held too long. He took a step east. That was all. 1 step. The group assembled around him the way it always assembled, without signal, without word, the formation finding its shape the way water finds its level. The children at the interior, the hunters at the exterior, the spears at carry, the fire left behind them, dying now without management, the smoke rising straight into the still morning air above the camp they were leaving. They walked east into the new light. The savanna ahead was enormous and indifferent and full of things that had no interest in their survival and full of other things that did. They knew this. They had always known this. It had never stopped them before, and it did not stop them now. Behind them, at the western woodland edge, in the shadows that the morning light had not yet reached, something watched them go.